Natalie was 19, drunk and deliriously happy that night. She was going to marry Nick, the love of her life, the very next day. Her head was buzzing from the drinks, but she remembered stumbling her way down the dimly lit corridor to her room. She was out as soon as she hit the bed. It was much later when Natalie felt the bed sink under Nick's weight. His heavy hand pulled her close.
Come close.
No. Let me go. We have to wait.
I can't.
Natalie wanted her wedding night to be her first time, but things were spiraling out of control, fast. She let her desires take control. When she woke up in the morning, she couldn't help but smile. Even though she had a splitting headache, she felt deliciously sore and alive. She heard Nick taking a shower in the bathroom and had half a mind to join him when she heard a knock on the door. Who she saw on the door left her gasping for air.
Nick?
Natalie was dumbfounded. If Nick was here, who was in the shower? Who was the man she had mistaken for Nick last night? The mess in the room was evidence of what had happened there. Natalie didn't know how to explain and barely got a grip on her thoughts. How could she have lost her virginity under such strange circumstances? What should she do? She couldn't bear to stay in this room even a second longer. She hurriedly picked up her clothes from the floor and rushed home. But bigger surprises awaited her.
How? How could you do that?
Natalie's father, Tom, was furious. She knew she wasn't going to get any support from her family either. Her stepmother never liked her. She was truly enjoying Natalie's ruin. And her stepsister Cheryl, they were never really close. Nick was the only one who could have understood her. But her pleas fell on deaf ears. Natalie tried to explain, but even she couldn't understand how she could have mistaken the stranger for Nick. Was she really that drunk? Was this truly just an accident? Or was she missing a crucial clue? She had rushed out of the hotel in panic without even checking who the man was. And now she had no way to prove herself innocent.
Nick, I need you.
No, you don't. There will be no wedding.
Natalie couldn't believe her ears. They had been together for 3 years and were about to get married. With a look of pure disdain, he turned around and strode off down the corridor. Natalie started panicking as tears rolled down her cheeks. It was so painful that she could no longer breathe.
Cheryl, it's not my fault, believe me, please.
I believe you, honey.
For a second, Cheryl gave her hope before she brought out her wretched phone, and Natalie started to get her answers. She was set up. Her life was ruined by her own sister. Meanwhile, in his office at the Claire Group, Bryce was looking at his assistant with a malicious expression. He had just received proof that last night he was set up, probably by his business rivals. He was drugged and sent to a different room than the one he had booked for himself. The girl had been brought in the same room earlier that night, and she too seemed drugged. Under the influence, Bryce and that girl had lost their senses and couldn't suppress their desires.
So, what do you do now?
Cheryl, I don't understand.
Natalie was getting one shock after another. How did Cheryl get this video? Why was she doing this to her?
How did you?
At the party last night, Cheryl had secretly spiked Natalie's drink. When the drugs kicked in, she pretended to help Natalie to her room, but actually took her to someone else's room, telling her that Nick was waiting for her with a surprise. So later, under the influence, Natalie didn't suspect a thing and believed the man in the room was Nick.
But why?
Because I want to marry Nick.
Natalie's world had fallen apart. Her stepsister was in love with her fiancé, and she was ready to go to any lengths to have him. Natalie was so angry that she couldn't utter a single word. Her whole body was trembling with fury. She rushed forward hysterically and wrapped her hands around Cheryl's neck. Hearing the commotion, her father rushed out angrily.
Go! It was her! She set me up! How dare you accuse my daughter of anything? You're just as wild as your mother was.
Unable to bear the pain any longer, she was on the verge of tears.
From now on, she's no longer my daughter.
What? Dad, what?
Natalie's father was easily influenced by her stepmother. He was an egoistic man, and he was deeply embarrassed when Nick canceled the wedding. He told Natalie to pick up her stuff and leave the country immediately. Natalie thought of her mother and her childhood, but no matter how hard she wished, she could never return to that time. Cheryl continued to pretend that she was innocent and gloated as she watched Natalie get kicked out of her house in a sorry state. Bryce told his assistant to go and check the identity of the woman who was in the room, but the assistant couldn't find her because at the same time, Natalie was being sent away. Natalie didn't even stay a night before she was packed off and sent out of the country. She had been exiled without knowing when she could return. She had lost everything in one night. From now on, she was on her own and alone in this world. But one question kept nagging her. Who was the man she had slept with the night before? 9 years had passed since she had been exiled, and in all that time, she had made even one phone call to her family. All her feelings had been erased on the day she was thrown out. Her father treated her like she was dead, and as if he couldn't care less about it. But last night, she had received a call from him asking her to come back. He didn't give any reason. He just said it was urgent now. She was on her way home, but this time she wasn't alone. Lost in her thoughts, she suddenly heard a lovely, gentle voice beside her.
Mom, hurry up!
It was Liam, her son, her most precious treasure. Only after she left the country did Natalie realize that she was pregnant. Although she was all alone, Natalie decided to raise him on her own. Liam had never known who his father was. Now that Natalie was going back, she had decided to find that man after all.
Here you go. You'll be flying to first class.
Come on, I'm sorry. Are you serious? Is this an airplane or kindergarten?
I'm sorry, what?
I don't buy expensive tickets to listen to children screaming. Mike, take the tickets away from her. Please.
What?
Natalie couldn't believe the audacity of this man, and they got into an argument. At that moment, neither Bryce nor Natalie recognized each other. They didn't realize that they had slept together 9 years ago. But while the two of them were arguing, Liam was looking at the man intently, and he noticed something. He stood quiet for 2 seconds before hurling himself at Bryce and then shouted, "Daddy!" Natalie and Bryce were completely taken aback.
Liam, what are you doing? It's not funny, making jokes about this.
Natalie was angry and confused at the same time. Why did Liam call the man Daddy? And then Liam told her about their identical scars. Natalie was shocked. Bryce's expression instantly turned ugly. Liam had always been sensible and listened to Natalie. But today, she didn't know what was going on. No matter how much she tried to persuade him, Liam continued to question Bryce for abandoning his mom. Bryce had known many women who had claimed to be pregnant with his child, but this was the first time he had ever seen such a clever and affectionate son. He was sure she was after his money. Natalie was fuming as Bryce kept throwing such vile accusations at her. And then he said something that triggered her.
Hey, why don't you give him a proper family?
Whoa.
Don't you dare tell me and my son how to live our lives. Liam, come on.
Natalie ignored the fuming man and went on her way. No woman had ever put Bryce in his place before. They were all infatuated with his strength and authority. But for the first time, he had met his match, and he was amused by her. Natalie didn't understand why Liam had called him Dad. It was their first meeting after that night, but they had no idea that their fates were already intertwined. But a few hours later, none of this mattered. Natalie was returning to her hometown without a clue of what had happened there. As she led Liam out of the airport, she bumped into Cheryl and Nick, who had come to pick her up, and the fog started to lift.
Hey, Natalie!
Cheryl held Nick's hand and smiled, leaning on his shoulder. Natalie thought that she no longer felt anything for them. But after seeing this, the hatred in her heart skyrocketed. Her stepsister and her ex-fiancé were getting married.
Mister, you forgot your wallet.
Did it fell out? Or maybe you pulled it out?
Before Nick and Cheryl could humiliate them further, Natalie jumped in to say that Liam was her son. Their shock was evident. Cheryl had countless questions in her mind. She hadn't even heard that Natalie was married. So where had he come from?
Wait. Don't tell me you gave birth after you cheated on Nick.
The moment she finished speaking, Nick, who had been standing beside his fiancée without saying anything, called Liam illegitimate. Natalie almost couldn't believe that this man standing in front of her, calling her son illegitimate, was the same person she had loved back then. After 9 years, she had discovered that their relationship was only worth this much. The slap was loud and clear.
If you say that again, you'll get a second one. It goes for you too. Fraud.
Cheryl's face turned red on being called a fraud.
How dare you? Do you think that because you're a woman, I won't do anything to you?
Don't touch my mom!
Nick was already furious, but now his rage increased. Liam tried to push Nick away, but he was too small. But Bryce had seen what was happening, and he could not stop himself.
Darling, there are you. I've been looking for you everywhere. I was getting worried.
Dad!
When Liam saw Bryce, he hugged him excitedly. Natalie hadn't expected the man who had been so rude to her to actually help her. When Liam said Daddy, both Nick and Cheryl froze. They had thought Liam was illegitimate, the son of Natalie and that other man. They hadn't expected her to actually find a man abroad, let alone one who looked rich and important. The two of them looked at each other and were suddenly at a loss for words. Natalie didn't know why he was helping her, but she took his cue and grabbed his arm. Nick gritted his teeth as he watched Natalie grab the man's arm and get into his car. It was too much for him to bear. Cheryl stood at his side, her face filled with undisguised jealousy as she looked at the man's car. She was extremely angry. How had Natalie gotten involved with such a man? Bryce stared out of the window with a cold expression. He seemed to be deep in thought until he heard Natalie's words.
Thanks for your help.
I just don't like what those two were saying, that's all.
Liam, who was sitting next to her, once again thanked his daddy for helping them out. Natalie shushed him. She didn't know why he believed this man was his father, nor did she know how to explain Bryce's actions. She explained to Liam that this man had only stepped in to stop those mean people from bullying them. But Liam wasn't backing down.
To have a baby with a woman, at least she needs to be attractive.
These words stabbed Natalie's sore spot, and her expression hardened. She had been grateful to him for saving her, but now it seemed there was no difference between him and Nick.
Stop the car. Stop the car, please.
She didn't want to say anything else. Bryce looked at her in confusion. When the car stopped, she got out, removed their luggage, took $100 from her wallet, and threw it on the car seat.
It's for the taxi. Thank you for your help. I hope I never see you again.
She took Liam's hand pulled the suitcase, and strode off, not giving Bryce any time to react. He looked at the $100 bill she had thrown at him and squinted his eyes dangerously. When was the last time a woman had spoken to him so bluntly? Usually, women didn't dare to get angry with him, not even when he was being rude to them. He gritted his teeth and gestured to the driver to drive. Natalie didn't go straight to the family home after getting out of Bryce's car. Instead, she took a cab to another place.
Natalie.
Granny.
Natalie quickly stepped forward to hug her granny. Her heart warmed and her eyes filled with tears.
How much suffering have you endured while you've been away?
Hello, I'm Liam.
Her grandmother was the closest person in the world to her. Naturally, she was overjoyed to see her precious granddaughter and delighted to meet Liam. She doted on him, wishing that she could keep him locked up in her heart. After a really long time, Natalie was able to breathe freely in a safe space. Having experienced so many things in her own life, Natalie's granny knew what to ask and what not to ask. And since her granddaughter didn't seem to want to talk about it, she didn't ask about the child or who his father was. Natalie stayed at her grandma's for the night. She was happy to come back to the place she had spent her childhood in. After a long time, she didn't feel alone in this world. She felt good here, and nothing could destroy this euphoria. Nothing except...
Hello again, sis. I knew this was the place to look for you.
I don't think we have anything else to talk about. Please, don't bother me, okay?
Wait. We didn't really want to come here.
Yeah, Daddy asked us to come. He wants to see you right away.
She didn't want to have anything to do with her family anymore, but she still hadn't made this clear, so she needed to talk to her father face to face.
Liam!
On the way to the family mansion, none of them said a word. It was clear that Cheryl hadn't come here on her own initiative. She still deeply hated Natalie and didn't want to see her. The car soon arrived at the family home. Natalie saw that the yard was pretty much the same as it had been when she left, but the situation was different now. She could no longer face these people with a calm demeanor as she had before. As soon as she stepped into the house, her stepmother came hurrying over, putting on a warm and gentle expression.
How was the flight? Are you hungry?
I know you don't like me, so you shouldn't act like you do.
Is that a way to talk to him, Mother?
Tom's sullen voice came from the living room. For the past 9 years, they hadn't cared about her in the least, but now they were showing all this enthusiasm.
I've sent you out of the country to think about your behavior. Instead, you've brought some strange kid here.
Hello, I'm Liam.
I will never accept him as the part of the Davidson family.
Tom was breathing heavily, and Cheryl found the perfect opportunity to instigate him.
Daddy, don't be so angry. This child, it's not his fault. Besides, he's your grandson.
Don't you dare call him that.
She purposely emphasized the word grandson because she knew this would make Tom even angrier. No one knew what it had been like for Natalie to be exiled abroad. She had been so poor before Liam was born that she sometimes had no money to eat and nowhere to sleep. She had suffered all sorts of hardships, but no one had called her to ask if she was doing okay. And now they had the audacity to reject her son.
Liam is my son, and I don't care if you accept him or not. I only came back here for the engagement party, and I'll be leaving as soon as it's over.
She had worked hard to rise up as a fighter. She had stopped caring what other people thought of her. Natalie was expressionless as she looked at her family. The bitterness in her chest bubbled up, but she forced it back down. She had thought her father might react like this, but when she saw it in person, she couldn't help but feel pain. She had no feelings about all this but disgust, so she casually agreed and then turned around and left with Liam. She left the home that she had lived in for 20 years without a shred of nostalgia. But on the way out, she was stopped.
Natalie, please wait.
What? What do you want from me? Did you come here to insult me even more?
All this while, Nick hadn't taken his eyes off Liam. He was clearly affected seeing Natalie in the arms of another man yesterday. After all, they had been together for many years before Nick decided to call off the wedding. He still somewhere had feelings for her.
I just want to ask you something. Okay? What did you mean when you called Cheryl a fraud yesterday?
What? She hadn't thought he would remember the words she had used in anger.
You the fraud. You cheated on me behind my back.
Are you done? Now you listen to me.
She didn't wait for him to stop talking, but frowned and cut him off. When she spoke, she became so enraged that her chest felt tight.
I had been set up, and you just walked away. You didn't give me an ounce of trust.
The man she had thought she loved, the one she had been willing to spend the rest of her life with, had chosen to leave when she had needed him the most.
So stay with your Cheryl now. You both deserve each other.
With that, she turned her back on Nick and prepared to leave. At that moment, Nick realized that there was something strange about what she was saying. He reached out to grab her wrist and asked anxiously,
What do you mean? You were set up.
Listen to the audio series, The Return, only on the Pocket FM app. Download now.